perché dobbiamo registrare il meeting per gli altri, ma abbiamo dimenticato all'inizio, ma adesso è iniziata la registrazione. Se qualcuno non vuole essere registrato, può, come è solito, lasciare il meeting o soltanto chiudere la camera se non vuole essere visto. Quindi cliccate in quell'icona, c'è un'opzione Q&A dove potete fare qualunque domanda. Noi cercheremo di leggere domande e porle ai nostri consulenti. Detto questo, ovviamente, come detto, il meeting sarà registrato e alla fine faremo un resoconto di tutte le domande e risposte e di quello che si è parlato nel meeting e verrà tutto pubblicato sul nostro sito web del Com.It.Es. Quindi chi partecipa al meeting ovviamente dà l'autorizzazione a pubblicare, a essere visto nella registrazione da altre persone in seguito. Se c'è qualcuno che non vuole, può comunicarlo adesso o dopo, ma questa è la decisione che abbiamo preso. Insomma, ok. Passo la parola a Enrica, che ci presenterà il Com.It.Es in Danimarca.
Grazie Maurizio.
Prego.
Allora, innanzitutto buonasera. Allora, come Maurizio vi diceva, sono anch'io una consigliera del Com.It.Es e niente, visto che noi del Com.It.Es abbiamo organizzato questo evento, volevamo spendere un paio di minuti per dirvi un pochino del nostro operato. Allora, i Com.It.Es, innanzitutto, che cosa vuol dire Com.It.Es? Comitato Italiano Residenti all'Estero. E praticamente i Com.It.Es sono degli organismi che sono eletti da voi, tra l'altro, che sono incaricati di rappresentare le esigenze dei cittadini italiani, cioè voi residenti all'estero, in questo caso in Danimarca, nei rapporti con gli uffici consolari. Non sto a leggervi tutto perché poi queste slide verranno appunto distribuite, però volevo dire che questo evento è appunto un classico esempio di questa collaborazione con gli uffici consolari, dove ci siamo resi conto che questo appunto evento era un'esigenza a cui dovevamo appunto porre fronte e ci siamo appunto organizzati organizzando questo evento. La prossima slide. Allora, no, sì. Allora, praticamente volevo dire che noi del Com.It.Es non siamo retribuiti, siamo tutti volontari, ci tenevo a dirlo, e praticamente abbiamo tutti un lavoro a tempo pieno, una famiglia, quindi questo, diciamo, ci occupiamo del Com.It.Es, del lavoro del Com.It.Es nel nostro tempo libero. Allora, il Com.It.Es si occupa il Com.It.Es Danimarca si occupa principalmente di informazione e di aggregazione per la nostra comunità italiana in Danimarca. Allora, i nostri obiettivi sono innanzitutto di fare rete, perché insieme diventa tutto più semplice, quindi se voi collaborate con noi e magari ci fate presente di alcune esigenze di cui magari non ne siamo a conoscenza, perché magari ci rendiamo conto che alcuni di noi hanno vissuto qui più a lungo, tanti anni, e quindi magari non conosciamo le esigenze di famiglie appena arrivate, per esempio di studenti, e quindi della immigrazione diciamo più giovane e più recente. Quindi insomma, se collaborando, facendo rete insieme, diventa tutto più semplice. Poi ci occupiamo anche, un altro obiettivo è di occuparci appunto di diffondere informazioni sulle procedure burocratiche del consolato, dell'ambasciata, che sono già esistenti, e anche di proporre, che, se possibile, dove possibile, dei miglioramenti. Anche questo in collaborazione con voi, ovviamente. Poi abbiamo anche questo obiettivo, insieme siamo più italiani, che è quello che noi intendiamo più come aggregazione, e praticamente qui vogliamo aiutare appunto a trasmettere i nostri valori e le nostre tradizioni alle nuove generazioni, ma non solo. E questo facendo eventi di feste, abbiamo fatto la festa di Ferragosto, di Natale, facciamo anche altre attività come per esempio il cinema, spero che molti di voi abbiano partecipato, e niente. In ultimo abbiamo anche questo obiettivo di aiutare i nostri bambini a scoprire l'italiano, a ricordare le nostre radici. Diciamo che di questo collaboriamo con il Comitato Pro Scuola, di cui noi non siamo direttamente responsabili, quindi si occupano più che altro loro. Noi finanziamo le loro attività dove possibile, perché riteniamo insomma pure anche questa una causa importante. Questo era quello che volevo dirvi, un po' per spiegarvi un po' che cosa facciamo, chi siamo. Se volete vedere più informazioni chi siamo, vedere le nostre foto, leggere anche un po' di noi, potete andare sulla nostra webpage Com.It.Es DK, oppure sulla pagina Facebook Com.It.Es Danimarca, e se avete domande per noi, per il Com.It.Es, magari non relative a questo evento, ma anche altre cose, c'è anche la mail info Com.It.Es DK. Tutto il materiale di questo evento verrà appunto distribuito qui, giusto Maurizio? Anche la registrazione?
Sì, esatto.
E niente, questo avevo da dirvi. Adesso lascio la parola al dottore Fabrizio Battaglia.
Sì, perfetto. Prego Fabrizio, puoi condividere le tue slide, io tolgo.
Condivido ora. Ok, visualizzate la presentazione?
Non ancora.
Io no.
Aspetta, eccola.
Ok.
Vai.
Perfetto. Allora, buonasera a tutti e grazie al Com.It.Es per questa bella opportunità. Il secondo perché stanno partendo le slide. Il secondo, presentazione. Ok, perfetto. Dovrebbe essere così. Allora, il secondo che...
Maurizio, scusa, io non vedo le slide, mi sembra di capire che ci sono anche altre persone
Non è
collegate
ancora
che non le
partita la
vedono.
slide.
Allora,
è partita, ma io ho fatto il pin, ma non la vedete, non so perché.
Perché a me partono le slide una dopo l'altra, un secondo.
La presentazione è uno ho fatto un pin, ma...
Inizia. La diapositiva corrente.
Non la vedete ancora?
Vedete la presentazione?
No.
Ok. Allora.
Prova a fare...
Io l'ho condivisa.
Potrebbe essere una soluzione, Fabrizio, se lei la manda a Maurizio e Maurizio la condivide come faceva con le altre slide.
L'ho già mandata a Maurizio.
Allora,
Scusate,
tu.
posso interrompere? Sono Ilaria?
Sì, prego, Ilaria.
Se guardate tra i partecipanti c'è un'altra finestra col nome del dottor Fabrizio Battaglia e si vede la slide. Se si clicca sui tre puntini e si dice schermo intero, si vedono le slide.
Io ho fatto pin, ma non ho fatto il pin a tutti, solo a me, penso. È uno dei partecipanti è Fabrizio Valerio Battaglia Presentation, si chiama.
Io non ho la possibilità di scegliere di vedere la presentazione.
Ok.
Allora, Maurizio, puoi aiutarmi tu?
Sì, provo io a...
Io l'ho trovato sulla lista dei partecipanti, ho trovato Fabrizio e ho cliccato sui tre puntini e è venuta le slide.
Ok, perfetto. Ditemi se riuscite a vederla.
Vedo che stanno riuscendo, hanno scritto un paio che stanno trovando. Basta andare sulla lista dei partecipanti, trovare il nome di Fabrizio Battaglia, cliccate sui tre puntini e vi viene la presentazione.
Cioè, io ci sono, ho cliccato sui tre puntini, ma non c'è, c'è solo annulla ed attiva microfono.
Provo io a condividere anche.
Bisogna fare pin, dicono.
Sì, devi fare pin se la vuoi vedere. Però aspetta che provo io.
Ok.
No, io la vedo.
Un attimo, vediamo se riesco a fare io. Perché non la vedo?
L'analisi della documentazione presentata al fine di poter effettuare il visto di conformità del municipio.
Ok.
Ditemi quando posso andare.
Vedete la mia forse?
Sì.
Ok.
Allora mettiamo insieme, Fabrizio, io ti seguo anche.
Ah, ok, perfetto,
Però
d'accordo.
Maurizio, se riesci ad
Abbiamo
andare in
entrambi.
slide mode, perché adesso si vedono anche le slide piccoline
Sì,
sulla
adesso vado
sinistra.
in slide mode, sì.
Certo, slide mode, esatto. Allora inizio dalla slide.
Ok, ti seguo Fabrizio.
Perfetto. Allora, di nuovo buonasera, grazie mille al Com.It.Es per questa bella opportunità di spiegarvi alcuni aspetti riguardo la tassazione dei redditi immobiliari in Italia per i residenti in Danimarca. In questa presentazione vedremo alcuni elementi della normativa italiana in materia di tassazione dei redditi immobiliari, ma anche alcuni elementi molto importanti per quello che riguarda la legislazione internazionale. E nello specifico andremo ad affrontare alcuni punti importanti della Convenzione contro le doppie imposizioni tra Italia e Danimarca. Prima di addentrarci negli aspetti tecnici, mi premeva svolgere una breve presentazione dello studio. Io sono appunto un socio fondatore dello studio tributario associato Battaglia Cesari Zangrillo. Maurizio, slide 3 per favore. E da 8 anni abbiamo fondato questa realtà, che è una realtà internazionale, in quanto abbiamo un network di professionisti in tutto il mondo, e ci occupiamo di consulenza fiscale a beneficio di aziende e persone fisiche, quindi consulenza fiscale nazionale e internazionale, consulenza previdenziale, quindi anche per quello che riguarda gli aspetti contributivi, Global Mobility, quindi tutti gli argomenti che riguardano il personale espatriato all'estero e impatriato in Italia, la parte immigration, quindi tutto ciò che concerne l'ingresso dei lavoratori in Italia, quindi le procedure di visto, di permesso di soggiorno, di carta blu, il payroll, quindi la gestione delle buste paga, cedolini italiani ed esteri, la consulenza in materia giuslavoristica, quindi tutto ciò che concerne il diritto del lavoro, la redazione di contratti di lavoro autonomo, di lavoro subordinato e la varevistica connessa, l'equity, quindi documenti relativi ai piani di azionariato, deliberati ad esempio da aziende multinazionali a beneficio dei dipendenti della consociata italiana, la gestione del patrimonio, quindi tutto ciò che concerne la pianificazione fiscale personale dei propri asset al fine di raggiungere un carico fiscale che sia ottimale in relazione ai beni che si possiedono. E poi anche sessioni di formazione ed aggiornamento tecnico, come quella che stiamo tenendo in data odierna. Ovviamente senza network il nostro lavoro sarebbe limitato soltanto alla realtà italiana. Fortunatamente abbiamo un network molto ben sviluppato, composto da diversi corrispondenti che sono nostri partner, e sono nella maggior parte dei paesi del mondo, e noi agiamo come single point of contact, quindi il cliente parla direttamente con noi e noi ci avvaliamo di questi professionisti terzi al fine di garantire la compliance e la consulenza nei paesi in cui il cliente è presente, quindi come nel caso della Danimarca. Per quello che riguarda l'argomento oggetto della presente sessione, siamo stati contattati in quanto molti italiani residenti in Danimarca hanno ricevuto delle lettere di compliance. È la slide 6, Maurizio. Hanno ricevuto delle lettere di compliance con le quali il fisco danese ha richiesto informazioni relative al valore degli immobili e ad eventuali imposte da pagare in Danimarca in relazione agli immobili posseduti in Italia. C'è una ragione per la quale avete ricevuto queste lettere di compliance. La ragione è la seguente. I redditi immobiliari rientrano in quelle categorie di redditi che sono soggetti alla cosiddetta tassazione concorrente. Che cosa significa? Che sono tassati sia nel paese di residenza sia nel paese della fonte. Se il vostro paese di residenza è la Danimarca, anche la Danimarca, oltre che l'Italia, ha diritto ad esercitare quella che si chiama potestà impositiva, quindi ha diritto a prelevare delle imposte locali sui beni immobili, che possono essere case o terreni o aree edificabili, che possedete in Italia. Infatti, se andiamo a vedere slide 7, Maurizio per favore, se andiamo a vedere il tenore letterale della convenzione, andiamo a vedere che i redditi che un residente di uno Stato contraente ritrae da beni immobili, inclusi i redditi agricoli e forestali, situati nell'altro Stato contraente, sono imponibili in detto altro Stato. Che cosa significa in detto altro Stato? Significa che sia l'Italia sia la Danimarca hanno diritto a tassare questi redditi. Se il legislatore avesse voluto prevedere un regime di tassazione esclusiva nel paese di residenza, avrebbe scritto sono imponibili soltanto in detto altro Stato. L'avverbio soltanto, tuttavia, non è contenuto all'interno del testo della Convenzione. E quindi, inevitabilmente, se un residente in Danimarca possiede, ad esempio, un immobile che è allocato in Italia, deve tassare il reddito sia in Italia ai sensi della normativa italiana, sia in Danimarca ai sensi della normativa danese. Salva la possibilità di richiedere in Danimarca, in questo caso, un credito d'imposta sulle imposte pagate in Italia in maniera definitiva. Ecco, noi lo chiamiamo imposte pagate a titolo definitivo. In Danimarca, poi ce lo dirà il collega, ci sarà probabilmente un'altra dicitura. Ovviamente i beni immobili, la definizione beni immobili è molto ampia e include anche l'usufrutto dei beni immobili e diritti relativi a canoni variabili o fissi per la concessione e lo sfruttamento degli stessi. Navi, battelli e aeromobili non sono considerati beni immobili. Le disposizioni convenzionali si applicano anche ai redditi derivanti dall'utilizzo diretto di questi immobili, quindi anche dalla locazione o ogni altra forma di utilizzazione di questi beni. Sappiamo appunto, come vedremo in seguito, che in Italia i regimi di tassazione di redditi di locazione sono tendenzialmente 3, e poi li vedremo. Alcuni sono più convenienti di altri, anche se poi per valutare l'effettiva convenienza occorre verificare la situazione del contribuente nel suo complesso. Prima di andare ad analizzare, ecco, poi qual è l'altra ragione per cui puoi andare alla slide successiva? Ok, perfetto, scambio di informazioni. Qual è l'altra ragione per cui avete ricevuto queste lettere di compliance? È che l'articolo 27, denominato scambio di informazioni tra Italia e Danimarca, prevede appunto uno scambio di documenti, informazioni, comunicazioni tra lo Stato di residenza e lo Stato della fonte, tale per cui lo Stato di residenza che non sia venuto a conoscenza della presenza di asset, di beni nello Stato della fonte, riesca a venire in possesso di queste informazioni al fine di richiedere chiarimenti, mandare questionari, inviare lettere ai ai residenti in Danimarca interessati e che non hanno adempiuto correttamente alla compliance danese. E consideriamo anche che la Danimarca è un paese OCSE, quindi lo scambio di informazioni è automatico, non è come nel caso di paradisi fiscali, come ad esempio le isole di Jersey, Panama, Belize o Seychelles, che sono paesi cosiddetti non collaborativi con i quali non c'è neanche lo scambio di informazioni su richiesta. Tra Italia e Danimarca lo scambio di informazioni è automatico. Proprio per questo avete ricevuto queste lettere alle quali poi occorre dare seguito. Vediamo alla slide successiva che giusto per ripassare alcuni concetti fondamentali. Voi in linea teorica siete tutti fiscalmente residenti in Danimarca, da quello che ho appreso. In ogni caso è bene ricordare che la nozione di residenza ai fini fiscali in Italia è basata su 3 condizioni che sono tra di loro alternative, e quindi è sufficiente che una sola di esse sia soddisfatta per essere considerati fiscalmente residenti in Italia. Tenete presente che la residenza fiscale in Italia implica un obbligo di pagamento delle imposte in Italia sui redditi ovunque prodotti. Quindi, se siete iscritti all'anagrafe della popolazione residente, oppure se avete trascorso in Italia almeno 183 giorni durante un anno di calendario, quindi dal 1 gennaio al 31 dicembre, o se avete il vostro domicilio inteso come centro degli interessi economici o familiari in Italia per almeno 183 giorni, allora siete considerati fiscalmente residenti nel territorio dello Stato italiano. Quindi, a specchio, per essere considerati fiscalmente residenti nel paese estero, quindi in Danimarca, è necessario non soddisfare tutte e 3 le condizioni che vi ho appena detto. Quindi essere iscritti all'AIRE per la maggior parte del periodo d'imposta, essere fisicamente dimoranti in Danimarca per almeno 183 giorni e avere il proprio domicilio in Danimarca per almeno 183 giorni. Guardate che il concetto di domicilio è un concetto molto ampio e ricomprende sia il centro di interessi economici, che può essere sia il vostro datore di lavoro, ma anche ad esempio eventuali attività imprenditoriali che potreste aver intrapreso in Italia o all'estero e che possono poi generare un flusso reddituale più o meno pronunciato, che poi dà maggiore o minor peso all'elemento, come dire, economico. L'altro elemento è quello familiare, quindi dove è localizzata la vostra famiglia diretta, dove il vostro coniuge, i vostri figli si trovano in Italia o in Danimarca. Se il vostro centro di interessi economici e familiari è localizzato tutto in Danimarca, la strada, tra virgolette, è in discesa. Non ci sono, difficilmente ci sarà un caso di doppia residenza, in quanto se vi siete iscritti all'AIRE e se vivete lì quasi tutti i giorni dell'anno, non ci sono problemi ad essere considerati fiscalmente residenti in Danimarca. Slide successiva. Se doveste essere fiscalmente residenti sia in Danimarca per normativa interna, sia in Italia, dobbiamo come dire, ricorrere alla Convenzione contro le doppie imposizioni. Intanto in questa slide spiego 2 concetti, appunto domicilio e residenza, che appunto sono il domicilio, il centro degli interessi economici, anche morali e familiari, e la residenza è il luogo in cui la persona ha la dimora abituale. Appunto nella slide successiva invece vediamo quelli che sono i criteri dirimenti nel caso di conflitto di residenza tra i 2 stati. Maurizio, se puoi cambiare, per favore. Allora, il primo criterio è quello dell'abitazione permanente. Quindi, se la Danimarca vi considera residenti in Danimarca, l'Italia vi considera residenti in Italia, occorre andare a vedere qual è lo stato in cui avete un'abitazione permanente. Se avete un'abitazione permanente sia in Italia sia in Danimarca, occorre andare a vedere il paese in cui le vostre relazioni personali ed economiche sono più strette, quindi il centro degli interessi vitali. Se doveste avere il centro degli interessi economici in un paese e familiari nell'altro paese, occorre vedere lo stato in cui voi soggiornate abitualmente. Quindi già adottando il criterio della dimora abituale, il conflitto di residenza dovrebbe essere risolto. Se non si dovesse risolvere, l'altro criterio è quello della nazionalità, o altrimenti le due autorità competenti, quindi l'Agenzia delle Entrate italiana e quella danese, dovrebbero in linea teorica risolvere la questione di comune accordo. Vi dico per esperienza che la procedura amichevole non si applica quasi mai, in quanto la situazione fattuale del contribuente è quasi sempre abbastanza chiara, ed in genere si va al massimo ad applicare il criterio della dimora abituale. Andando avanti, nella slide successiva, se in seguito l'analisi della posizione fiscale del contribuente propende per una non residenza fiscale in Italia, sappiate che i non residenti pagano l'IRPEF solo sui redditi prodotti all'interno del territorio dello Stato. Questi possono essere redditi di lavoro dipendente, per attività di lavoro dipendente esercitata, o meglio prestata nel territorio dello Stato, redditi di lavoro autonomo per attività di consulenza esercitata nel territorio dello Stato, o, come nel vostro caso, si considerano prodotti in Italia i redditi fondiari. Perché? Perché derivano da appunto beni situati nel territorio dello Stato ed eventualmente messi a reddito, come può essere ad esempio nel caso della locazione dell'immobile. Se andiamo alla slide successiva, andiamo a vedere quella che è la tassazione dei redditi di locazione. Allora, una breve premessa: non esiste in linea astratta un regime più conveniente rispetto all'altro. La convenienza si vede alla fine analizzando la posizione del contribuente nel suo complesso. Che cosa voglio dire? Che un regime ordinario che prevede la tassazione su base progressiva del reddito di locazione potrebbe essere molto più conveniente di una cedolare secca, in quanto ad esempio il proprietario dell'immobile potrebbe aver ristrutturato quell'abitazione e quindi potrebbe godere negli anni di detrazioni IRPEF. Detrazioni IRPEF che ad esempio non sono fruibili nel caso di regime di cedolare secca, che però ha un'aliquota molto più bassa. Infatti nel regime ordinario che cosa tassa lo Stato italiano? Tassa il 95% del canone, che è quello appunto riportato all'interno del contratto stipulato tra il proprietario e l'inquilino. Questo canone deve essere riportato all'interno della dichiarazione dei redditi, quindi nel quadro RB, e deve essere poi calcolata quella che è l'imposta lorda, l'IRPEF lorda, che segue gli scaglioni di reddito riportati nel punto 2. Una volta determinata l'imposta lorda, occorre verificare se il contribuente ad esempio ha diritto a detrazioni che possano portare l'imposta netta a dei livelli più bassi. Ovviamente il contribuente può avere anche diritto a delle deduzioni del reddito complessivo, e anche queste sono fruibili nel caso di regime ordinario. C'è anche da ricordare che la scelta del regime ordinario per la tassazione dei redditi di locazione prevede il pagamento dell'imposta di registro del 2% del canone annuo per il numero di annualità, e lo stesso canone è soggetto alla rivalutazione annuale secondo gli indici Istat, cosa che ad esempio non è prevista per la cedolare secca. Quindi tassare i redditi da locazione secondo il regime ordinario è in linea generale la tassazione meno conveniente, sempre che non si abbiano altre detrazioni da cui far scaturire un'imposta netta più bassa. La cedolare secca, se non ricordo male, è stata infatti introdotta più di 10 anni fa. Quindi adesso, ad oggi, rappresenta il regime forse più scelto dai contribuenti. Ciò nonostante, slide successiva, Maurizio, per favore, la slide 14. Il regime del canone concordato, ha come effetto principale la riduzione del 30% del canone di locazione imponibile ai fini IRPEF. Ovviamente questo canone deve essere poi tassato secondo i criteri progressivi, che porteranno quindi verosimilmente ad un'imposta lorda molto più bassa. E in sede di registrazione è sempre dovuta l'imposta del 2% per il numero di annualità, una riduzione però del 30% della base imponibile. Quindi lo sconto che si applica all'IRPEF si applica anche alla base imponibile ai fini dell'imposta di registro, quindi sia le imposte dirette sia le imposte indirette. Ovviamente occorrerà anche calcolare le addizionali regionali e comunali in base alla regione e al comune in cui è ubicato l'immobile, quindi il carico fiscale si compone di tre elementi: l'IRPEF, l'addizionale regionale e l'addizionale comunale. Questo vale sia per i redditi da locazione in regime ordinario, sia nei canoni da locazione in regime a canone concordato, quindi ai sensi della legge 431 del 98. Se andiamo alla slide seguente, vediamo appunto il regime della cedolare secca. La cedolare secca, ecco, lo dice già il nome, è un'imposta forfettaria ed è un regime tributario facoltativo. Quindi in sede di contratto di locazione, di stipula del contratto di locazione, il proprietario dichiara di voler optare per questo regime. Ovviamente l'immobile deve essere a uso abitativo, quindi non deve essere un fabbricato, ad esempio, a 10, quindi un ufficio, uno studio privato. Proprio perché la norma è nata con lo spirito di agevolare le locazioni di edifici ad uso residenziale. E quindi le categorie catastali interessate sono quelle da A1 ad A11, esclusa la A10. Il modello da riempire è il modello RLI, che si trova appunto sul sito dell'Agenzia delle Entrate e deve essere inviato telematicamente. Quanto si paga? Soprattutto quali sono le imposte, tra virgolette, sostituite dall'aliquota della cedolare secca? Si paga generalmente il 21% flat, salvo eccezioni in cui si paga il 10% per quello che riguarda, ad esempio, i contratti di locazione a canone concordato relativi ad abitazioni ubicate nei comuni di Bari, Bologna, Catania, a tutti i comuni appunto riportati nella presentazione, nonché in quelli ad alta tensione abitativa individuati dal CIPE, dal Comitato Interministeriale per la Programmazione Economica. Per applicare l'aliquota agevolata al 10% per i contratti di locazione a canone concordato non assistiti dalle organizzazioni della proprietà edilizia e degli inquilini, è necessario acquisire l'attestazione rilasciata dalle organizzazioni firmatarie dell'accordo. L'imposta sostitutiva di fatto sostituisce, scusate il gioco di parole, l'IRPEF, le addizionali regionali e le addizionali comunali. Sostituisce altresì l'imposta di registro e anche la rivalutazione annuale del canone secondo gli indici Istat. Quindi, ma non consente la fruizione di deduzioni e detrazioni. Perché? Perché il reddito di locazione tassato con cedolare secca non entra all'interno del reddito complessivo. Quindi è una sorta di tassazione separata, ma concorre comunque alla formazione del reddito ai fini ISEE e ai fini della fruizione di altre deduzioni o detrazioni, come ad esempio quelle da lavoro dipendente. Questo per evitare distorsioni all'interno del sistema tributario. Un contribuente potrebbe infatti tassare tutto a cedolare secca solo per dimostrare al proprio sostituto d'imposta, ovvero sia al proprio datore di lavoro, che non ha un reddito complessivo elevato. Invece ce l'ha, proprio perché se ha 50.000 euro di reddito tassati a cedolare secca, pur non essendo incluse nel reddito complessivo, in realtà concorrono a quello che è come dire, lo status, la ricchezza totale del contribuente. E quindi il legislatore ha inserito questa clausola. Se andiamo poi a vedere la slide seguente, un esempio numerico, notiamo che nel caso notiamo che a parità di reddito di locazione previsto da contratto, la cedolare secca di fatto è il regime più conveniente, quanto una cedolare secca del 10% nel rispetto delle condizioni sopra esposte su un carico, o meglio su un reddito di locazione da 20.000 euro porta a un 2.000 euro annui di imposta dovuta, mentre nel caso di regime ordinario arriviamo addirittura tra IRPEF e addizionali regionali e comunali, arriviamo a circa 5.000 euro, mentre nel caso di reddito di locazione soggettato a regime concordato arriviamo ad un reddito di circa 3.600 euro. C'è da tenere presente che nel caso 2 e 3 non sono state considerate, ovviamente per semplificare i calcoli, non sono state considerate eventuali deduzioni o detrazioni che il proprietario dell'immobile potrebbe avere diritto. Ciò premesso, ogni contribuente sa quella che è la sua situazione ed è libero di scegliere un regime piuttosto che l'altro, ma in linea generale il regime più conveniente sembra essere appunto quello della cedolare secca. Che cosa aggiungere? Ci sono ovviamente degli adempimenti amministrativi, parliamo sempre di imposte, quindi ci sono delle scadenze da rispettare per il pagamento e per l'invio telematico della dichiarazione dei redditi. Le scadenze per il pagamento seguono quelle della dichiarazione dei redditi, quindi il 30 giugno dell'anno successivo alla dichiarazione del reddito, quindi nel 2022 si pagano le imposte del 2021 e gli acconti per l'anno in corso. Entro il 30 novembre si versa il secondo acconto, mentre la dichiarazione dei redditi va inviata entro il 30 novembre sempre dell'anno successivo. Per coloro che invece redigono il 7 e 30 sono previste in realtà diverse scadenze scaglionate nel tempo a partire da maggio, ma ogni anno, vi dico, cambiano anche le finestre di invio dei flussi telematici, quindi tendenzialmente a partire da fine aprile, inizio maggio si iniziano a inviare i modelli 7 e 30 e mano a mano anche i modelli redditi. Se invece analizziamo la slide 17, per favore, possiamo vedere che cosa succede nel caso di vendita dell'immobile. Allora, anche in questo caso dobbiamo distinguere tra normativa interna e normativa convenzionale, quindi tra normativa italiana e normativa del trattato. Ricordiamo che la normativa del trattato tra Italia e Danimarca è recepita dall'ordinamento italiano con legge dello Stato, quindi acquisisce norma di specialità ed acquisisce lo stesso rango della norma interna, della norma italiana. L'aver acquisito carattere di specialità fa sì che se la fattispecie è più favorevole al contribuente debba applicarsi la norma convenzionale. Vediamo che nel caso degli immobili, in realtà anche nel caso di vendita dell'immobile, esiste una tassazione concorrente. Esiste una tassazione concorrente in quanto il reddito ritratto dalla vendita del fabbricato è tassabile sia in Danimarca sia in Italia. Vediamo prima come funziona la tassazione italiana. Se io acquisisco, o meglio, acquisto un immobile in un determinato anno e lo rivendo prima che siano trascorsi 5 anni dall'acquisto e non lo adibisco ad abitazione principale, quindi ad esempio acquisto una casa per le vacanze, l'eventuale differenza tra corrispettivo percepito al momento della vendita e costo di acquisto è assoggettato a tassazione. A tassazione di che tipo però? A tassazione progressiva. Salvo optare in sede di rogito, quindi di contratto di vendita, per la tassazione al 26%, che è un'imposta sostitutiva, che tendenzialmente è più conveniente. Quindi se considero un costo di acquisto di 200.000 euro, un corrispettivo di vendita di 250.000, il mio capital gain di 50.000 sarà tassato nell'ordine di 13.000 euro. Riescono ad essere esclusi da tale disciplina gli immobili acquisiti per successione e quelli adibiti ad abitazione principale per la maggior parte del periodo compreso tra l'acquisto e la cessione. Questo per quello che riguarda la vendita dell'immobile. Non è presente nella slide, ma l'articolo della convenzione tra Italia e Danimarca che regola la vendita delle proprietà immobiliari è l'articolo 13, utili di capitale, paragrafo 1, in cui secondo lo stesso schema di cui all'articolo 6 viene confermata la tassazione concorrente. Ovviamente occorrerà poi chiedere al collega danese se sono previsti meccanismi compensativi, quali ad esempio quello del credito d'imposta. Allora, per quello che riguarda invece la slide successiva, se non mi ricordo male, era quella dell'IMU. Secondo, vendita dell'immobile, l'IMU, ok. Allora, oltre all'IRPEF e alla cedolare secca, sono delle imposte che riguardano la messa a reddito della proprietà immobiliare. Esiste anche un'imposta sul patrimonio, quindi che scaturisce dal possesso dei beni immobili, e questa imposta è l'IMU. Si chiama appunto imposta municipale propria ed è dovuta a seguito del possesso di fabbricati, escluse le abitazioni principali, che siano diverse dalle categorie A1, A8, A9 o di aree fabbricabili e terreni agricoli. Da chi è dovuta? Quindi ambito soggettivo, dal proprietario o dal titolare di altro diritto reale. Come facciamo a capire se sono questi immobili considerati abitazione principale? È che devono coincidere i due requisiti di residenza anagrafica e dimora abituale. Quindi il possessore deve essere residente nel comune in cui è ubicato l'immobile, quindi iscrizione presso le liste anagrafiche del comune di ubicazione dell'immobile, e deve dimorarci abitualmente. Come dimostro la dimora abituale? Con l'intestazione delle utenze e con la presenza fisica, che può essere anche verificata eventualmente da un pubblico ufficiale. E quindi, andando alla slide che segue, come dire, la base imponibile dell'IMU è data dalla moltiplicazione della rendita catastale per il coefficiente di rivalutazione, che è 1,05 per 160, che è il moltiplicatore che si applica nei casi più comuni, per tutte le categorie A, tranne appunto la A10, che sono appunto gli uffici. Infatti i casi più comuni sono categoria catastale A e C2, C6 e C7, che sono le pertinenze dell'abitazione. Maurizio, se puoi andare avanti, per favore. Ok, ancora dopo. Ok. Esistono in ogni caso delle agevolazioni ai fini IMU, in quanto un contribuente può possedere anche un fabbricato di interesse storico-artistico, la cui base imponibile è ridotta del 50%, così come i fabbricati dichiarati inagibili o inabitabili da un perito. Anche gli immobili concessi in comodato dal soggetto passivo apparente in linea retta entro il primo grado, che la utilizzano come abitazione principale, godono della riduzione del 50%, purché il contratto di comodato chiaramente sia registrato e ci sia una residenza anagrafica e dimora abituale del comodante all'interno dello stesso comune in cui è ubicato l'immobile. Quindi, se il comodante è residente a Milano e l'immobile è ubicato a Roma, non è possibile avere questa riduzione del 50% dalla base imponibile. E se andiamo alla slide 21, anche le abitazioni locate a canone concordato, di cui alla legge 9 dicembre 98 numero 431, possono godere della riduzione al 75%, quindi uno sconto del 25% sull'IMU lorda. Per quello che riguarda invece le detrazioni dall'abitazione principale, ovviamente riguardano soltanto gli immobili di cui alla categoria 1 a 8 a 9 e beneficiano della detrazione di 200 euro, rapportati al periodo dell'anno durante il quale si protrae tale destinazione. È assimilata anche all'abitazione principale la casa familiare assegnata al genitore affidatario dei figli a seguito di un provvedimento del giudice. Queste, diciamo, sono le informazioni principali che ci tenevo a darvi per quello che riguarda la tassazione italiana. Gli elementi come dire, chiamiamolo diritto internazionale, che non è diritto internazionale, relativo alla Convenzione, ecco, sono racchiusi all'interno dell'articolo 6 e dell'articolo 13 e riguardano rispettivamente appunto la tassazione dei redditi immobiliari e la tassazione delle plusvalenze immobiliari, e servono comunque da raccordo con la presentazione che il mio collega terrà tra qualche minuto. Era necessario farvi appunto questa carrellata di informazioni per appunto fare un po' da trade union con ciò che verrà detto in seguito dal mio collega. Quindi io rimango poi a disposizione per qualsiasi ulteriore domanda nella sessione Q&A o anche adesso se abbiamo tempo. Io vi ringrazio per l'attenzione e insomma sono a vostra disposizione per tutti i chiarimenti necessari. Spero di essere stato anche nei tempi.
Grazie Fabrizio. Allora, un paio di cose, abbiamo un po' di domande. Poi c'è adesso andremo a leggere le domande, ma vorrei sapere il tuo collega come entra nel meeting, perché dobbiamo approvarlo e non sappiamo, non sta entrando col suo nome forse, non so se può contattarlo e chiedergli qual è il nome che sta usando per entrare.
Allora,
Nel frattempo io...
Vedo un secondo.
Sì. Nel
Abbiamo
frattempo
un
io...
limite di 100, capito Fabrizio?
Sì.
Scusami?
Abbiamo un limite di massimo, quindi
Di 100.
abbiamo paura che non riusciamo a... perché molti non riescono a...
Ok.
Per non cacciarlo.
No, certo, assolutamente. Allora, un secondo, magari lo contatto.
Allora, nel frattempo io smetto di presentare. Allora, molte domande sono per il collega danese.
Sì, infatti.
Fabrizio, se tu puoi provare a leggere queste domande e cercare quelle che vanno per lui, allora quelle che possiamo chiedere a lui nel frattempo.
Allora,
magari ci sentiamo noi in esterna mentre lui fa la sua presentazione.
Sì, mi ricordi un secondo dove le trovo?
In basso a destra c'è un bottone con un triangolo, quadrato e cerchio. E poi puoi cliccare su Q&A. Nel frattempo io provo a vedere, ti faccio le domande e provo a vedere se tu puoi rispondere. Allora, la prima qui che sembra, forse puoi rispondere tu, dice: dal capital gain si possono dedurre le spese di intermediazione?
Posso già rispondere adesso? Allora, dal capital gain possono dedursi, o meglio, la differenza deve essere fatta tra corrispettivo corrispettivo della vendita e costo di acquisto, ma nel costo di acquisto, come dice la norma, possono essere anche inclusi gli oneri accessori al costo di acquisto. Quindi gli oneri accessori al costo d'acquisto dovrebbero rientrare anche le spese di intermediazione, quantomeno la norma ce lo consente, in quanto dice: è aumentato il costo di ogni altro costo inerente il bene medesimo. Ovviamente parliamo sempre dell'acquisto, quindi non della fase di vendita. Quindi tutti gli oneri accessori sono quelli relativi all'acquisto. L'importante è che sia questo. Sulla vendita la norma non si esprime. Posso andare a vedere eventualmente se c'è qualche circolare di chiarimento e dare una risposta più dettagliata in seguito.
Ok, tanto questa domanda poi sarà anche risposta nel resoconto alla fine, la troverete sul web con la risposta. Un'altra domanda che forse puoi rispondere tu è, mentre aspettiamo che il tuo collega entra, poi quando lui arriverà, passiamo la parola a lui. Come è regolata la doppia tassazione su un immobile ereditato di cui si è proprietari solo in percentuale? Da specificare che l'immobile non ha fruttato reddito.
Ok, allora se non ha fruttato reddito parliamo soltanto di un immobile detenuto ai fini patrimoniali. Quindi sull'IMU, o meglio, se è un immobile che è localizzato in Italia, come credo, sull'IMU non è possibile richiedere un credito per imposte pagate all'estero, ma eventualmente, già dalle informazioni che mi aveva dato preliminarmente il mio collega danese, è molto probabile che il credito d'imposta se lo possano prendere in Danimarca, perché la normativa danese dovrebbe avere un comma, una dicitura che consente di evitare questa doppia imposizione, ma in Italia sicuramente non è possibile prendersi un credito d'imposta da togliere dall'IMU dovuta, non c'è il credito d'imposta estero.
Ok, comunque poi sarà chiarito,
sarà chiarito dal collega danese. Sì, se invece c'è un altro caso potenziale, che è il residente in Italia che ha un immobile all'estero e il residente in Italia deve pagare un'imposta patrimoniale sull'immobile detenuto all'estero, a quel punto può detrarre l'imposta estera patrimoniale dall'imposta patrimoniale dovuta in Italia. Però è il caso inverso, quindi non credo che sarà un caso appannaggio dell'audience di oggi, ma è sempre una fattispecie che può accadere. Il residente a Roma che ha un immobile a Copenaghen deve pagare l'IVE in Italia e può prendere il credito d'imposta sull'imposta patrimoniale se esistente in Danimarca.
Ok. Non so se questo è relativo alla Danimarca perché non c'è scritto bene, però dice in caso di vendita dell'immobile di proprietà avvenuta dopo più di 5 anni in perdita rispetto al valore di acquisto.
Sì.
Si chiede non c'è un capital gain ed immagino non ci sia nemmeno un rimborso della tassazione. È vero?
Ho capito che intende il partecipante al convegno, cioè se l'eventuale minusvalenza può essere richiesta a rimborso. La risposta è no.
Non c'è un rimborso, ok.
No.
E non c'è un capital gain neanche.
No, non c'è un capital gain, quindi non è come con le minusvalenze finanziarie che sono compensabili se sono della stessa natura. Parliamo di una minusvalenza derivante dall'alienazione di un bene immobile.
Ok,
In
grazie.
questo caso non si può fare.
Mm-hmm. Questo sono le di Danimarca. C'è molte domande sulla Danimarca ovviamente, ma quella parte ancora... la detrazione...
Io ho visto anche una domanda, la differenza tra contratto e concordato. Sì, posso dare qualche cenno.
Sì, prego.
Allora,
Comunque andiamo in pausa fra 2 minuti, così
sì, no,
era già prevista nella...
sì, no, i contratti molto rapidamente
Sì,
sono
prego.
contratti di locazione a canone concordato sulla base di accordi tra organizzazioni della proprietà edilizia ed inquilini. Quindi sono sostanzialmente dei canoni già predeterminati, stipulati sulla base di negoziazioni, mentre il contratto ordinario segue le leggi del libero mercato, quindi è pattuito liberamente tra le parti, tra proprietario ed inquilino.
Ok. Ok, grazie. Allora, andiamo un attimo in pausa e ci vediamo qui alle 18:10.
Va bene, va bene.
Ok, grazie a tutti.
Ok,
Ci vediamo fra un po'.
ok, a tra poco. Va bene, ciao, ciao, ciao. Hello, Jacob. Hello, Jacob.
Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. Thanks for joining.
You're so very welcome. We have Matthias and Andrea as well.
Okay. Hello,
Evening.
Hello, Matthias. Hello, Matthias. Nice to meet you. And Andreas. I cannot see you so far, but I trust you are in.
I am in, but my problem is that my camera in my computer is not working. So
Okay,
I'm gonna
okay.
just be on the microphone for tonight. Sorry about that, but that's the technique of 2022.
Okay.
Okay.
I just
So,
finished
guys,
the
we are in a break,
presentation.
but we will start in 10 minutes with the presentation, but everybody's already in the meeting, so you're welcome to present yourself in a few minutes. Yes.
Great.
Thanks.
Yes, I've just ended the Italian presentation and making a sort of connection with you regarding the Italy-Denmark double tax treaty. So the audience already know you're going to the topics you're going to speak about, and there are many people interested in understanding how does the taxation mechanism work in Denmark, also in the light of compliance letters received. So my presentation was just regarding the Italian side, but it was useful in order to fix some starting points. I believe that the most interesting part for them is yours. So I give you my permission to tell everything about the Danish tax system, and hopefully we will manage to answer most of all clients' questions, which are quite a lot. Anyway,
Absolutely, and
go ahead.
we'll go ahead with the presentation in a short while here, and but basically the idea that we have prepared here is that we'll do a short presentation on Danish rules, and then use that as a guiding to the tax treaty. And we know you already provided some details on the tax treaty, so we'll try to keep it. How is this relevant for Danish tax declarations and whatnot, and then the floor is open after that for discussions and whatnot.
Excellent.
In the meantime, guys, maybe you can share your presentation if you have it, so we can try to see if we can pin it.
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah, because we had some problem with pinning the presentation to the screen.
Is this working?
I can see it. Oops, sorry. Okay, it looks like it's working. Yes. Just to let you know, we are recording the meeting as well. So because we have a maximum limit of 100 people, but there are many more that wanted to participate. So we are recording for them to see it later.
Sure.
Okay, I think we are back. We have our guests from Denmark, Jakob, Matthias, and Andre. Thanks for being with us. I will actually immediately leave the words to you, and you can present your presentation. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. And we'll do a short introduction to ourselves. It will be predominantly myself and Andre who will do the presentation, and Matthias is more or less observing us, and he'll provide some feedback. But feel free to ask him questions as well. But basically, I'll start with some introduction to internal Danish rules, and then leave the word to Andre, who will take you through the double tax treaty from a Danish perspective. Afterwards, we'll do more or less questions and what to do and Danish tax compliance for individuals living in Denmark. Before starting, let me just briefly introduce myself, and Andre and Matthias can introduce themselves as well. So my name is Jacob. I'm the tax manager of United Tax Network in Denmark, and I've been working with international tax compliance and cross-border rules for the last 10 years. We have quite an extended knowledge on tax treaties, and we've also been working with Fabrizio and his team for a few years and cases as well. I'm heading the team in Denmark, and we have 5 individuals currently working only with cross-border and tax compliance in respect of cross-border activities. Andre, will you do a short presentation on yourself as well?
Yes, thank you, Jacob. My name is Andre. I'm a tax consultant of United Tax Network. I've been working at United Tax Network since 2019. As Jacob, I'm primarily working with international taxation for individuals, meaning like persons like yourselves, in situations with cross-border activities, whether that is property or that is salary income. That is one of our main aims of advisory. So yeah, Matthias.
You are muted, Matthias.
Sorry, I just gave Matthias the ability to unmute.
So,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, perfect. Well, my name is Matthias, and I am also working at United Tax Network as a tax assistant. I have been working there for almost half a year now, and I am currently assisting Andre and Jacob in whatever they want me to do. Almost.
Thank you, Matthias.
Yeah.
So let's move on with the actual presentation. So initially, we just want to put some brief words on how Danish tax liability are generally assessed. So Denmark operates with 2 types of tax liability. First of all, we have tax residency or full tax liability, as we would call it in Danish language. This means that the individual have a substantial connection to Denmark, either having a place of living in Denmark or staying consecutively for at least 6 months in Denmark. If this is the case, the individual is a tax resident of Denmark in respect of Danish domestic rules only. If an individual is fully liable to pay taxes in Denmark, this entails a tax liability on worldwide income, meaning income from sources not only in Denmark, but also from sources outside of Denmark. Denmark also have a source tax liability or limited tax liability. This encompasses income from sources in Denmark. And that would be the case if an Italian resident individual owns property in Denmark and has income from sources from such property. then a Danish tax liability will occur as well. This is, of course, just an example of such a limited tax liability, especially for property. Denmark applies taxation on several levels. First, Denmark applies a tax liability on continuous income from property. An example of this would be rental income. So if a taxable or an individual who is fully taxable to Denmark receives rental income from a property in Denmark or property abroad, Denmark will impose a tax on that income. Secondly, Denmark applies taxation on capital gain when a property is sold. This is also applied for property in Denmark and abroad. However, there are certain exemptions to be aware of here. Because if the property is sold, but the property has been the main place of living or the place of living for the individual or the household of the individual, it can likely be sold without any taxes applied in Denmark. It's a specific evaluation, but there are exemptions. And lastly, Denmark applies a wealth taxation on the property value. This means if you own property and you are fully liable to pay taxes to Denmark and you own property, you pay a property taxation. Basically, the mechanism is that a value is assigned to the property, and based on that value, you pay 0.92% of the value up until 3,040,000 Danish kroner, and 3% of any value exceeding that. This is a yearly tax payment, and André will get into how this relates to double tax treaties and potentially having properties abroad. Some of the questions that we have received, we want to answer during the presentation as well. So you have asked beforehand if is the payment to the Danish tax authorities of taxes on property held abroad by Italians living in Denmark confirmed? And yes, we can say that is confirmed. And you see there are three types and 3 levels of taxation that could be imposed. It doesn't really matter if the real estate has been bought prior to moving to Denmark. It will change one aspect, because any gain or yield prior to entering into Denmark or moving to Denmark is not taxable. So the value that the property had when you move to Denmark is not taxable to Denmark, but anything outside of that will be. Yes. So that's basically how taxes are assessed on property from a Danish perspective purely. In terms of double tax treaty, I'll hand over the word to you, André.
Thank you, Jacob, and thank you for presenting the Danish perspective on this. I will not go too much in depth with the double tax treaty, because I understand that you've already received at least an overview of what a double tax treaty is and what that means to you. But just to sum up, a double tax treaty works in the way that it determines where an individual is a tax resident. That is due to Article 4 of double tax treaties. So what you need to consider is am I a tax resident of either Denmark or Italy? And how can I determine that? Well, when you have to determine your tax residency, it comes to different things you need to consider. But the overall thing would be that where is your home base? Which country is actually your base? Meaning, where do you live? Where do you have your most interest, both economically and in regards to personally interests? And in the end, if that cannot determine, then where are you staying the most? So that is what is going to be considering, why am I actually a tax resident? Further on, when you have determine whether you're a tax resident of either Italy or Denmark, you should be aware that the country of tax residency typically is the country which has the main right to tax you on your income. So that is the overall most important point. You're gonna be taxed as a main point in the country of tax residency. For instance, there are source taxation criteria, meaning that, for instance, if a property is situated in Italy, then Italy would have a sourced taxation right, meaning they can tax income in relation to that property, but Denmark will still be able to do so as well, but should, however, grant you a relief in Danish taxes. Typically, we are working what we call the credit relief, meaning that if you, for instance, are paying 1 Danish krone in tax in Italy, you would have that as an relief in your Danish taxes, meaning you would have to pay 1 krone less in Denmark. But overall, you would still be taxed in Denmark on your income, and Denmark would have the taxation right. So why is this important? It is important to consider what kind of income am I receiving? Is it at all covered by the double tax treaty? What we refer to as property value added tax, or in Danish ejendomsværdiskat, is not covered by the double tax treaty, meaning when Denmark is gonna put a value added tax upon your property in Italy, that is not gonna be covered by the double tax treaty. So we cannot go towards the double tax treaty and actually ask for a relief of taxes paid in Italy, for instance. We do, however, have an internal rule which can actually credit taxes paid in Italy. So you're not going to be double taxed if you have paid a similar kind of tax in Italy on the value of your property. When you're renting out your home or your house property in Italy, the income derived from that property would typically be covered by the double tax treaty, meaning when you are receiving an income as rental income from Italy and you are a tax resident of Denmark, then Italy will typically be entailed to tax you on on the income, but Denmark would still see the income as taxable to Denmark, but would, however, have to give you a relief of taxes paid in Italy on your income. So that states the overall Danish perspective on the double tax treaty. And some of the questions we have received is also relating to other kinds of income. So for instance, we have a question, in addition to the above, do Italian bank accounts have to be declared to the Danish tax authorities? And are there any tax payable in relation to that? The short answer is yes. You have to declare your bank accounts to the Danish tax agency if you're a tax resident and full tax liable to Denmark. And that would not as such entail any kind of taxation. But if you, for instance, have transferred money from the account to Denmark to a Danish account, then that could be a taxable event. If you have received any kind of interest, that could be a taxable event, which both would be taxable in Italy and in Denmark. Typically, if you have an Italian bank account, we would see, okay, Italy has the right to tax you up till 10% of interest income, and Denmark would be able to tax you on the threshold above that. Another question we have received in advance to this is it confirmed that according to the double tax treaty, Italy is indicated as the country that must collect the taxes existing on its territory, and that since it is not specified that this is an exclusive condition, Denmark also asked to pay tax on this property. Again, the short answer is yes. If Italy does not have an exclusive taxation right, all considering here that you are a tax resident of Denmark, then Denmark would be able to tax you on that income. So for instance, if you have received rental income, then Italy would be able to tax you on the income, but Denmark would be able to do so as well. So again, going back to the thought of the tax residency, it is really important that you consider whether you are a tax resident of Denmark, because if you are so, you would most likely be taxable to Denmark, and there would be taxation right to Denmark of that income. There's also a question. Someone claims that after talking to Skat, he stated that property taxes paid abroad for those with a fiscal residence in Denmark must be paid only in Denmark and not in Italy. Is it confirmed? That is not correct. If you have paid property taxes in Italy, that could very well be correct. The Danish Property Value Add Tax Act, sorry for the long word of act there, but basically, if the tax has been paid in accordance with Italian legislation, then you would be able to receive a credit of taxes of the property value added tax. And in general, property placed in Italy, then Italy would have a limited taxation right to that income. Again, assuming here that you are a tax resident of Denmark. And that also answers the next question. Is the payment of Danish taxes offset by the amount paid in Italy, and therefore only the difference is payable in Denmark? And yes, that is correct. If Italy has the taxation right, which they, as the main point, would have, to property placed in Italy, then yes, you would be able to only pay the difference in Denmark. Is it confirmed that is it confirmed that the property tax on the home held abroad must not be paid in Denmark if the property is rented? That is correct. So if you have a property where you should be paying property value added tax off, you would not be entitled to pay that kind of taxation, because that is only payable if your home is not rented out. So therefore, you would not be subject to property value added tax in Denmark if you have rented out your home or house or whatever it is you have in Italy. So typically you would instead have to pay taxes of your rental income if you have a positive rental income after having deducted expenses. And the last questions I have added here under the double tax treaty is what happens in case of the sale of the real estate property. Jacob was mentioning some of this in his presentation, that if you have actually used this place, this house, this apartment, as a place of living for you and your family, then this typically would not entail any kind of taxation in Denmark. But if it has not done so, if it's a house you, for instance, have for rental purposes to gain income, and you sold this with a advance or a gain, then yes, that gain would be taxable. Again, assuming you are a tax resident of Denmark, you would be able to pay taxes of some portion to Italy and from the main point to Denmark. So that's the main issues we have seen in your questions so far. We're happy to discuss further when we're going further. And I will put ball back to you, Jacob, on relations to declaration of income or tax return.
Yes, thank you, Andre. So this is more or less the final point on our presentation, then we'll move on to what to do and questions and whatnot. But Denmark operates on a declaration of income tax return principle, which means any income from sources which are not reported by a third party, an individual has to declare himself via the tax return. The tax return is digital in Denmark. So everything happens on a digital basis via a digital access to the Danish tax authorities. If an individual has income which is reported by third parties, this could be an employer or similar, said individual will likely receive an annual statement or year-end statement automatically from the Danish tax authorities. But it is still the responsibility of the individual to verify if information is missing and declare that information. This is often the case for foreign income, such as income from properties abroad. if, as Andrea perfectly mentions, that you are fully liable to pay taxes to Denmark, and you are also a tax resident to Denmark, you must register all of these properties with the Danish tax authorities and declare if there's any income earned from these properties. The type of income could be different depending on your overall business or not business, because subletting one property to a family may not be a business. Subletting 30 properties to various parties, you are now doing a business. So the actual type of declaration is dependent on the qualification of the type of income. If you're a tax resident in Denmark, this is also here you declare how much taxes you have paid in Italy, and you would receive, as I said, a credit relief of taxes paid in Italy in the Danish tax return. Finally, in terms of the actual properties, if they are not sublet, that is the case where you pay the property taxes, and in this case, you assign a value to the properties. This value is assigned based on a few principles, meaning the value when you bought the house or the property, the purchase value, and then there are some guidelines based on the currency and the country and the year that we're declaring for on how to assess the value. But it's always based on the purchase value, and then we calculate from there. But there are some guidelines that we can use. If there is a value assigned by an authority, that can be used as well. But I don't think that's the case for Italy. But Fabrizio, you and the team can help me if I'm mistaken. But at least from the Danish tax authority's point of view, there is no value assigned from a Danish authority, Italian authority that we can assess the values based on. So that's the responsibility, that an individual must register the properties, register the income from the properties, and finally register any taxes that has been paid abroad in order to claim a relief in the Danish tax return. This is something that needs to be done yearly. And one of the questions that we received is also if the tax authorities can go back and reassess previous tax returns. And yes, the tax authorities can reassess 4 years worth of tax assessments initially. This is what we call ordinary reassessment. So 4 years of tax returns can be reassessed without any discussions, so to speak. However, if the tax authorities can argue that there has been fraudulent or incorrect tax assessment on a fraudulent basis, they can reassess the last 10 years. But this is a higher standard. The Danish tax authorities must document that fraudulent behavior has been more or less the case. And that's, of course, a specific evaluation from case to case. However, normally the lack of submitting the tax return is one of the criteria that the tax authorities use to reassess for the last 10 years. It's likely that's one of the questions as well. It's likely that when the 2021 and 2022 evaluation has commenced and finalized, it is likely that the tax authorities will query and ask for previous years as well. We have seen that at least in other cases. I think prior to us providing some more or less details on what to do now, I think we should take some questions.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions, even though
Shoot.
you probably answered a lot already, but I will try to start with the one we translated, and then we go with the one the guests translating themselves, because otherwise I will ask the same question twice if I'm not careful. Okay, let me see here. I have a question from Federico Fioravanti. I think he didn't translate it himself yet, so we translated it for him. So the question is, just a second. Okay, the question is, a person has lived in Denmark many years and he registered with the IRE, which is the Italian Living Abroad anagram. In 2011, he inherited a small apartment in Italy from his parents, together with his brothers. So he only owns 1/4 of the apartment. And because there are 4 brothers, there is no big value, and the Danish he regularly pays the tax IMU in Italy, and he received this letter from Sket. He would like to know how to behave.
Yes. So let me answer this one. So the fact that he owns this jointly does not really impact his obligations in Denmark. This is still something to declare if there is an income associated with owning this, or if it's subject to the property value taxation in Denmark. But of course, if he only owns 1/4 of the property, he should not declare the full value, but only 1/4 of the income that is generated.
Okay, thanks. So one from Stefania Cazzorla. When my father died, I became the owner of 1/3 of 50% of the value of a property. The property was under a community property regime with my mother. My mother is currently continuing to live in the property. I would like to know if I have to pay for this part of the property I inherited in Italy. She would like to know if she has to pay in Italy or in Denmark for this.
Yeah, so we cannot answer if there's anything to declare in Italy, but I think you guys have maybe already covered that in your presentation. So yeah. I understood the question as she inherited the property and then she's subletting to her mother. Maybe not by a formal subletting, but in reality that's the case. And how we would treat this in Denmark is we would assign an income from the rental or the subletting, and that's something to declare in Denmark as well. Yeah, and we do in Denmark if there's no payments. In worst case, we fixate a payment, meaning even though there is no actual cash between the parties, we, from a tax perspective, assess the taxes that we think or the payments that we believe should be paid between the parties if they were more or less buying and selling on market values.
Okay, but the person living in this house is the co-owner of the house. Yeah. Does it also needs to have like she's paying a rent?
Yes, still, yeah, because it's just from a Danish perspective, we're just subletting to the co-owner. She's subletting her half of the property.
Okay, so basically, set a rental, half of it is income for the person that lives in Denmark, and that's tax rated.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. How just want to mention that it's not when we're discussing rental on homes and properties with only one property. Normally, what we see is that the rental is to some extent equal to the expenses, mortgage payments and insurances and maintenance and such. I'm not saying that it's 1-to-1, but normally we're not seeing high yields and returns on properties and subletting of properties. And maybe you can support me here as well.
That is correct. That is typically not something that we actually see that is going to be specifically taxed very high here. So no, I agree, Jacob.
Okay, thanks. Fabrizio, from your side, do you know what if she also has to pay the part of Italian taxes?
Well, we need to assess whether her mother is under a comodato regime or not. I believe yes. So if the mother is under comodato regime and Anna is a resident in Denmark, I believe Anna has to pay IMU taxes on that real estate. Because the real estate is owned by her, even if is being used by her mother. Only if Anna was to live in Italy as resident in Italy in the same municipality where the real estate is located, in that case 50% reduction in IMU taxable basis would have applied, but it seems it is not the case.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So I have another question from Anna Boron. No, this is the same question.
Yes, very similar.
Yeah, so they've made the same question basically. So I think the answer is already there. Antonella De Palo is asking, Italian and Danish taxation on bare ownership. How does it work in Denmark? I think it's a very broad question. I don't know if there is a quick answer or if we already answered during the presentation.
So I failed to hear the question. Could you repeat it? Sorry.
It says Italian and Danish taxation on bare ownership. How does it work in Denmark? What do we have to pay for the bare ownership of the house, of the property?
So what does that mean?
Jacob, I try to explain you. Okay. Yeah. Bare ownership, we mean, for example, subject A is owning the property. Okay, it's owning the property, but the use of the property is given to another subject who is living there. Okay, I think it's similar to the subletting issue you mentioned in the previous questions. So in Italy, the bare owner does not declare the property. Only of course the Italian tax authority knows he has that property, but the real user is another one.
Okay, so yeah, that's similar to a subletting situation from my perspective in Denmark at least.
But bear in mind here that this is a very specific question, and there are specific rules in Denmark on. We have seen it with the German Nischbau. It is, as I understand, is somewhat the same. That you actually, it's on the other person's position, but it's you who's owning it. Put it in this case. And we do have a specific set of rules that is covering this, and we can perform this evaluation, but we would need to know more on the specific situation to be able to evaluate that.
Okay, thanks. So another question from Maurizio Bonelli. In case of renting a property in Italy, does CET accept the cedolare secca, Fabrizio, I don't know how to translate this, at 10% or 21%, or does CET not consider a reduction taxation? Fabrizio, maybe you can explain this.
Jacob, cedolare secca is like a flat tax. So it's not progressive tax, but it's a flat tax. So how does the SCAT treat the flat tax from a Danish tax perspective?
Yeah, that's maybe you who are the expert here, Mark.
Yeah. So basically what we take into consideration, or the Danish tax agency takes into consideration when they are actually determining what the Danish tax will be, is that if in Italy it's covered by a specific scheme, then there is, as we mentioned before, there could potentially be a situation where you could be better off in tax in Denmark as well. However, a flat tax rate would typically not entail any difference in Denmark, just as such at least. So if the Danish tax, for instance, is 50% if it's a rented out property as personal income, then you would typically only see that the 21% or the amount paid under the flat tax rate would be credited towards the Danish tax.
Okay, thanks. Question from Paolo Ratti: how to register the ownership in Denmark when only a quota is owned? I think we already responded to this. Another one, how is double taxation ruled on an inherited property? The real estate did not generate any income.
Yes, so if there's no income, then, and again, bear in mind that this is of course assessed from a Danish tax perspective, if there's income or not. But discussing property, it's likely easy to assess if rent has been paid or not, so to speak. But if there's no income, then of course only the property itself needs to be declared in Denmark. And this is one of the instances where it's likely that the property value tax will then apply.
Okay. And this is a related question, actually. How do you determine the value of the real estate property?
Yeah, so we do that based on the purchase value at the time of purchase. Then we recalculate that to three different values: a 2001 value, a 2002 value, and current year value. And we do that by using the OECD indexing guidelines and the exchange rates, because we need to declare it in Danish kroner. So OECD is presenting guidelines on how to more or less reassess this, and then the purchase value is the foundation.
Okay. One more question. I have a lot of questions. Sorry, guys. This will go
fine.
on like this. If I had to register 1/16, this is from Achilles Pacciante, 1/16 of the bare ownership of a real estate property, not rented, and where the co-owner is living there. How to register it in SCET, basically? Is there a special way of doing it, or is just on the horse of Gorse, or what is it?
Will you take that number?
Yeah, basically when you are registering property in SCET.dk or the digital tax return format, you are actually also indicating how much of the property are you the owner of. So if you're owning 1/16 part of the property, you should state that you're the owner of 1/16 part on this. For instance, if you were two owners, you would add that you are the owner of 50% of this property, and so on, depending on the number of owners.
And then the fact that the co-owner lives there, even if she's not paying rent, you still need to calculate a rent following the Danish. How do you calculate this rent? Is it SCAT that will do it for you, or do you have to guess?
If a co-owner is living in there for free, meaning there are no rent to the other parties, then yes, you should calculate what we call the market rent, meaning you should be able to document that a similar kind of property is the rental this amount. If you do not do so, the Danish tax agency or SCAT can actually fixate the interest based on the market rent. So yes, you should add a rental income, even though she's living in there for free.
Okay, thanks.
But it also comes to who is the individual that is living in the property, because we typically distinct between whether it can be considered a gift that she's living there for free, and that would come with the caveat that you need to be in what we call the gift area of your. For instance, a mother and a father can grant a gift to their son, and typically that is a very narrow term in Denmark, meaning that we would often see that this shall simply be considered a normal situation, and that we should fixate a rent.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Another question from Ole Hansen. How would SCET treat a case in which an Italian property has been possessed for several years while residing in Denmark, how to deal with the years lapsed, the previous years.
So basically what you need to consider at this point is that you have been asked for information for 1 or 2 years, depending on the letters. What will happen after the review from the Danish, or the audit from the Danish tax agency, is that they will look at other grounds to investigate more years than the 2 years we have opened at this point. So in the event that you have income earned from previous years that you have not declared, you should already now prepare for that. The Danish tax agency will be able to go back as long as 10 years if they comes in due time.
Okay, thanks. Is the Eindhoven tax due for all properties, houses, but also pieces of land?
It depends. So pieces of land who is not quote unquote a property, no. But if it has sufficient substance to be a property, yes. So if it's only land and no property has been built yet, no, there's not assigned any property value. It has to be a property.
But because in Italy we have lands that can be built on and land that cannot be built on, which are agricultural use. Does it make any difference?
No, it's whether or not there is a private house
Only if there is a
on the
house.
land. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So maybe we have not been clear on that. So the property value tax, or the ejendomsværdiskat, as it's called in Danish, that only applies to private homes, not rentals or agriculture or similar. Only properties that can be used to live in.
Okay, good, thanks. Okay. If I sell the apartment, should I inform SCAT immediately, or do I have to wait for the final tax declaration on the following year?
Yes, so that follows the tax declaration after the year. Yes.
Thanks. Does the Italian IMU give tax relief?
I think that's for you, Fabrizio.
Yes, I just explained you what is IMU. It's a property tax on the property use or usufruct of the real estate property. So it is not a tax on income, but just as a matter of owning the property.
Yes, that's likely something that can be offset in the Danish tax assessment then, if you have to pay the property taxes in Denmark as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, just a second. Let me try this from Andrea B. The 3,400 threshold is commuted on the cumulative value in case of multiple properties, or is it on the single property?
Yeah, it's property by property. So we don't calculate on a cumulative basis. It's property by property estimates.
Okay. Another question, maybe let's do this one. Maurizio Bonelli, second question, he has a second question. My in-laws are evaluating to buy an apartment in Italy and live in it, giving the sole property to their daughters, who need to be done scat-wise by both of them. What needs to be done scat-wise, they call it, by both of them? Do they need to pay taxes on it? So I assume this person lives in it in Denmark. So they want to buy an apartment in Italy and live in it in Italy, but giving the property to their daughters. So I'm not sure here which one lives in Denmark.
Let's assume it's the individual who wants to buy the property, who are resident in Denmark, and then maybe the individual who have asked the question can change it if not. It's like that I see here. So yeah. So there are several items to be aware of here. So all of the taxation that we have just discussed are clearly in place here as well. But if the daughters are also subject to Danish taxation. Oh, it's the daughters who are in Denmark. Okay, so the daughters, if they live or has the ability to live in that property, they could easily be subject to some of the taxation that we're discussing here. Or if there's no rent paid, that's basically a gift from the parent to the daughter. So we have a lot of different ways to tax people, unfortunately, but anytime you receive some sort of income in Denmark, either directly or indirectly by not having to pay for something that you receive, it's likely a taxable subject in Denmark.
Yeah, so basically the parent buy the house and will live in it, but give it as a present to the daughters that lives in Denmark. Yes.
Yes. Then the daughters needs to be very certain that they are not receiving this as a taxable gift.
Yes. Okay. And how do they avoid to have as a taxable gift?
So it basically it could be inheritance, and then they only pay inheritance tax or fees. But it could also be they just receive a gift and then they pay a gift tax on it. It really depends on how this is structured. So there are ways to not avoid this, but at least mimic. So potentially selling by loan agreements or similar. So there are mechanisms, but we cannot advise on how to do this on this call. I'm just saying there are ways to structure this, and if you want to inherit or gift daughters a property, it's wise to at least consider Danish tax implications by tax advisors, tax authorities, or tax lawyers, because it could be a bad position if these cases are not evaluated thoroughly.
Yes. This is because in Denmark it's not enough to just put your name on a house. You need a loan or to pay something.
Exactly.
So it doesn't exist something like I buy a house, I put it in my children's name. Doesn't exist in Denmark.
Exactly. You can put it that way. Yeah, it's a high value asset in Denmark.
Yeah. In Italy, it doesn't matter who pay. The owner pay the taxes, but who pays it's a different situation. Okay, thanks. Is the Eiendomsværdi tax due for all properties? But this was already done. This is double. Sorry. For paying the Eiendomsværdi skat in Denmark, the foreign property, Danish skat was the official value of the property in year 2001, 2002, and 2020. However, this official value is not available in Italy tax system. What do you do?
Yeah, so the case here is that the individual has bought the property prior to 2001, I assume.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, then it's a hard case because it's not easy, but it's easier if the property has bought from 2001 until now, because then you can use the indexing. If it's bought prior to this, you have to estimate or guesstimate the value that the property had in 2001 and use the same mechanisms. Such an estimate can be done by a realtor, for instance, or if there's any thresholds or guidelines that can be used. We have
But it's up to the person to show SCAT this kind of data.
At least be able to argue how it has been assessed, because the idea is that the tax authorities might have a different point of view, but this is just as much an argumentation and discussion in this case, because there's no bottom line, so to speak, because no one really knows the value. So it's just as much be able to argue. Let's assume that the property was bought in, let's say, mid 1990s, and you can see the market value has more or less increased, let's say 50% over the course until 2001. Then you can argue, I bought it at this value and I'm adding 50%. Here's my 2001 value. And this could be scrutinized by the Danish tax authorities, but they would need to have a different, more or less, a value to declare then.
Okay, thanks. Another one or two questions, then we make another break, and then we come back a little bit later. What is the percentage of tax to pay in Denmark if the foreign income on multiple property rented out is considered as a business?
So basically, if you have a multiple renting out of apartments or houses, which is not in a company, but is solely you as a person, then that would be treated as personal income. Personal income is typically taxed at marginal tax of 55% in Denmark, but is depending the overall progression of your other income, so could range between 35 to 55%, depending your other income situation.
Okay, thanks. Is the assessed value of a property outside Denmark in Italy usually higher or lower than the purchase value? Or is it the same, maybe?
Can you just repeat the question?
Is it the assessed value of a property outside Denmark in Italy usually higher or lower than the purchase value?
Well, I think it's more for me, Maurizio.
Okay.
The assessed value, it's not very clear to me, the concept of assessed value, because Italy actually does not assess the value of a property. The value of a property.
I think they mean the assessed value for the Fosket. What value has the property Fosket? Which I think it is the maybe, yeah. Sorry.
So that really depends. But often we see values being lower than the current market value. But this is by no means a guarantee that is the case. However, we always assess a 2001, a 2002, and a current year value, and it's the lowest of these values that is the foundation for the property value tax. And often discussing foreign property, it's the 2001 value that is the lowest. There are mechanisms on how to calculate these different values, but it's often the 2001 value which is the lowest, and then that will be the foundation on an ongoing basis, because it will also be the lowest on the next year and the next year and so on.
Okay, thanks. One last question, then we go on a little break. What if there is a pending loan with an Italian bank? Is the tax on the property taking that into account?
Yeah, so the property is in Italy, I assume, and it has been bought using loan or lent money from an Italian bank. That's how I understand the question, at least here. So it depends on whether or not this house is on a sublet business position or not. So if that's the case, you would use the mortgage interest as part of the income calculation. So those are tax deductible, meaning you can offset them towards rental payments. And basically these are then offset, and you will see if there's any gain left. If that's not the case, you would need to consider whether or not the individual can offset these mortgage payments in their Danish tax return, and that depends on their tax position.
Okay. Yes, let's take a little break. Let's come back at maybe 10 minutes past 7, and then we will continue. Thanks.
Don't worry. Keep going.
Okay, so we are back. Should we start with some more questions?
It's fine for us.
Okay, so this is a question that maybe we answer, but this person is confused. You say, is the foundation for the SCAT estimation the purchase price or those indexes mentioned? Purchase after 2001?
So basically, when you're considering values for property value-added tax or ejendomsværdiskat, there are three values you can use. It's 2021, 2022 plus 5%, or the last one in the income year before, meaning for 2022, it will be the value in 2021. So that is the three values you can choose between. And it doesn't really matter if it's the one or the other. You can actually choose the one cheapest for you or the lowest for you, because that would entail the lowest tax. And that is perfectly all right to do so.
And those are market values?
Yes.
Good, thanks. In Italy, we pay taxes for the income earned 1 year before. How can I get tax relief if I still did not pay taxes for that year in Italy? So there is a little bit of disalignment here between the two taxations.
So when you say you pay taxes from the year before, so if you earn, if the income is earned in 2022, you are not paying taxes until 2023 then? Is that correct understood?
Fabrizio?
Yeah, sorry, I just logged in. Could you please repeat?
In Italy, we pay taxes for the income from the year before.
Yes.
How can I get tax relief if I still did not pay taxes for that year in Italy?
So do you get tax relief in Denmark?
Yeah.
Yes, you need to wait that the tax return is filed. So the tax return is generally filed by November the 30th, but the taxpayer can ask the chartered accountant to file the return in time for claiming the Danish tax credit. Of course, the tax returns cannot be sent before May the 1st, but generally in June they can be sent. Okay. Also because the software are not updated enough, so there may be some problems. So,
but in Denmark you pay by April, right? I'm asking you guys.
Jacob.
Yeah. So in Denmark, you know the taxes in March and April.
Yeah.
But they are actually due from the 1st of January.
Yes.
So let's assume 2022
yes.
as an example. All of the income earned from January to December is payable initially from 1st of January 2023. But at this point, you don't know the final tax yet because you have not received the statement, which is you're going to receive in April. At
but
that
in
point,
Italy, then you can do a minimum from June, Fabrizio is saying.
Yes, May, June.
Yes, and if you know the taxes, then in Italy you can go back and change and add that to the Danish tax statement as well.
Okay.
Okay, so in Denmark you have up to 2-3 years to change that anyway, right?
Yes, exactly. So the 4 years back we discussed in the session initially, that applies for taxpayers as well.
Okay, that answered the question. Then you can do your taxes in Denmark. Then when you do the one in Italy, you go back and correct the one in the Danish website, basically. Okay, let's do this one. It seems short. I inherited an apartment in 2019 July and sold in January 2021. The sum was transferred to Denmark and used the money to buy a house in Denmark. Then the apartment was empty all 2022. What should I recreate to Scott?
It's a very specific
This
question.
is
So yeah, so as a main rule, you pay the property taxes as well, even though it's empty. But if it's uninhabitable by a tax standard, you don't pay any property taxes. If it's uninhabitable, could be if there is water damage, for instance, and you really cannot live there until it's refurbished or maintenance has been applied to it. But it's a very specific evaluation. So either you pay the property taxes, or you can claim it's uninhabitable and you don't pay any taxes on it.
yes, but you still pay the gain on the one you sold in Italy. Even though you use the money to buy a house in Denmark, you still need to pay the gain tax on the apartment you sold.
Maybe. So there are two things to consider here. Likely the individual moved to Denmark as part of selling that apartment, so maybe there is no gain in Denmark. And even if there is a gain in Denmark, I understand the question as the individual lived in the house prior to moving to Denmark, then likely the exemption rules of Denmark will apply, meaning no taxes.
Okay, thanks. I have a property in Italy that has always been ruined and unlivable. No electricity, water, or gas, like roof destroyed. Is it still taxed in Denmark as normal property? And if the status of this property is changed to deposit, I don't know what it is. Would it change Danish tax? Probably, I think it's they mean warehouse.
Magazzino. Warehouse, yes.
Yeah.
Magazzino.
I think they changed the status of the house that was destroyed as a warehouse. Does it change anything for the Danish tax?
Yeah, so this is likely, again, this is a specific evaluation, but as explained here, it's likely uninhabitable.
Yes.
Meaning we get into what we just discussed, and then it's exempt. And if it's a warehouse, then it's not a property that you can live in, and it would be exempt from that respect as well.
Okay. This applies to houses in Denmark and in Italy.
Yes.
It doesn't matter where it is. Okay.
Exactly.
Good to know.
So we don't really distinguish. We take them all as a same in Denmark.
Yes. If you and your spouse have together a house in Italy, which the total value is more than 3 million Danish kroner, could you apply the 0.92% tax because you only have half of it? So if it's 4 million, then you have only 2 million.
Andre, will you take that?
Yeah. So typically when you're assessing the value for the property value added tax, you would be entitled to half of the value added tax if you're half or 50% owner of the property. And so on, if you're 25% owner, then it would be 25% of the total calculated property value added tax. So you actually look at the entire value of the property, calculate the property value added tax, and then if you're a 50% owner, you can call it 50% discount.
Okay. Okay, another one. If the mom is still living in the property and someone inherits it, it is different than subletting since you become owner, but you are not allowed to sell or rent by Italian law. They ask Fabrizio if this is correct, and if they should pay taxes in Denmark. Is it correct that they cannot sell the house because the mother is living there?
Which is the question, Maurizio? I'm trying to
the question is, can they sell the house by Italian? It said that by Italian law, he cannot sell the house because his mother is still living there. Is it true? And then he asked if it's true, then should he pay the taxes because he would like to sell the house, but it's not allowed by Italian law.
Well, it depends on the type of contract by which the mother is still there. If it is under a comodato regime, we should look when the comodato ends. Or if we are under a rental regime, we should look at when the rental contract ends. So when the rental contract ends, and also we need to see at the clauses of the rental contract whether the rental contract may be terminated by either parties. Generally, rental contracts last 4 + 4 years or 3 + 3 years. So we need to look at the contract, basically.
Okay. So, but I think the point here is, if he inherited the house, so he didn't buy it, and he cannot sell it, he's stuck with this house, and does he need to pay taxes in Denmark?
It's just a very specific situation, but what we can say is that the fact that it's illegal from an Italian point of view, if we just assume that, it's not that illegality is not transferred to Denmark. So we still assess from a Danish perspective, and then we're back to some of the discussions we had prior to the break.
Good, thanks. So this one is more, I think, practical. How should I practice declare my house in Italy? Because online, if you cannot do it, how can a person find those values? So maybe the question is more like, is there some type of consultants in Italy that you can ask to, or how does it normally work in Denmark if you don't know how to do it?
Will you take that, Andre?
Okay. As I understood, the question is, if you do not know how to classify your income or add it to a tax return, was that the question, or was the question?
How to practically do this in online? I think the question comes because in Italy we have a special figure that does the tax to almost every single person. There are very few people that do it by themselves, but that's not very common in Denmark. So what is the procedure in Denmark if you don't know what to declare, how to find the values, and all of those things we discussed?
So what you need to consider here is that if you do not know how to fill in your tax return, then you can either use an advisor as us. You can also go towards the Danish tax agency and state, I have no idea of what to do here. I have this kind of income, or I have this property, because in Danish, we have what we call the borgervejledning, or the citizen guidance, and they can actually guide you a long way, and you can always book a meeting at the tax agency's nearest office to go through what you actually need to do if you do not want to pay for advisory services ourselves.
Okay, thanks. Does the sketch require some specific documentation in case of shared property? Or you just need to inform them of your part or percentage of the value of the property? Do they need to know the other owners or stuff like that, for example?
Initially, you would only have to file your owner percentage of the property, but you could be asked for additional information stating, is this actually true? Are you only owning, or for instance, 50%? And that could be an owner's agreement, or a document stating what is the rate between the owners here.
Okay, thanks. So this one, I don't know if this is a repetition. It's Fabrizio Cerreto is saying, when I bought a sole property or bare property in 2015, Scott told me that the property should not be declared in Denmark because I did not have any rights on use on that house. This is not subletting. The user has the actual right to use, and it is not by a contract. The user should be considered as the actual owner, they say. I don't know what this...
Yeah, that could be right, as Andre mentioned prior to the break as well. There are cases in which we agree that from a Danish tax perspective, that the entire responsibility has been transferred, or the values between these are a zero-sum calculation. So that could likely be the case here. Again, it's a very specific evaluation that would fall into a specific evaluation. Sorry, because it has to be considered. But general rule, if you earn income from properties, it's something that is something to be declared in Denmark. But then there could be exemptions if you have a very specific situation where you don't really earn any income, or the income you earn is equal to a equal expense that you have.
Yes. I was also talking with Fabrizio. I think when the case is very, very specific, we can give an idea, but you still need documentation and you need to talk with an expert and a consultant. Yes.
Of course. Yes, we are here to provide immediate responses if possible. However, if it is not possible, we can only make a hypothesis and wait for documents to be delivered in order to give a more accurate questions. But that would be a tax advisory activity, of course.
Yeah. Okay, this is a mix of English and Danish terms from Fabio Pezzolato. In case the overlevende foreldre has a livslang boligret to a property which she co-owns, and such right descends from Italian law, it looks like the Vurderingsstyrelsen says that the co-owner is exempted from taxes if the law establishes that the boligret can be proven. Do you agree? I didn't understand it, but maybe you did.
Well, maybe it's the best answer we can give here. So it's basically the same principles that we've been over a few times now, that if you have the ability to live in a house and you live in a house, you pay property taxes. If you have sublet or you're in a position where this is quasi or indirectly subletting, you're taxable of the rental income. And the Vurderingsstyrelsen, as is being mentioned here, would not take any decision on rental income because that's not their main subject of expertise. They would consider the property taxes. So a cohabiting position, it's likely a non-property value tax position, but then reflected over in a rental income situation instead.
Okay, thanks. So this is one in Italian, but I will translate it for you. I have a part of several properties that I inherited from 1992, and they don't produce rent. So it just has it. But the form in Scat Deco is only showing that you need the value from 2000.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter when he bought it. Does he have to just register the value from 2000?
That we had that as well. So he needs to, to the best of his knowledge, assess the value in 2001, 2002, and current year. And he can assess the purchase value in 2001, 2001, sorry, to the best of his knowledge, and then use the index calculation method from there.
But does this mean that he will still pay taxes for every year, but only those 3 years will be used to calculate the average value?
Exactly. That's the calculation basis, but he pays taxes every year.
From 1992 or from 2000?
From 2001. Yeah.
2001,
these rules were well, and maybe 2001, because that depends on timing here. No, 2002 would be the first year if I see if I recalculate from 10 years to now.
Okay. Let me see if I find something else. Those are a bit difficult to translate. Why are those letters from SCAT coming now? Is SCAT only now exchanging the cross-reference property data with Italian authorities?
Yeah. So sorry, Andre, go ahead.
No, I would imagine that this is simply because they first now have access to the registry in Italy. We have seen this prior to this, that Denmark is going towards other authorities. We saw it with America a couple of years ago with Project Money Transfer, as it was called, that they get access to databases with, for instance, property registries. And therefore, as soon as they get there, they start reaching out to people. So that would initially be why they are contacting people now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is maybe a question that is not personal, but is very technical. What is the difference between formuverdi e fast eiendom ulenel, rubric 491, and eindomsverdi iorel for indomsorel, rubric 212?
Yeah, so that's a great question and very technical. So the first one, that's the value. It doesn't impact any taxes. It's just the value, because we still assess the wealth of the individual, but it doesn't born anything except a valuation. The second one, that's the property value taxes.
Okay, thanks. Let me see. I don't understand this, so I will ask it as it is, so, but maybe it was answered. I purchased a property in 2008. In order to pay value tax, can I declare the 2001, 2002 values by using the OECD rates?
Yes.
Yeah. What about the previous year? Do I have to use the OECD? This was already answered. We only need 2001, 2002, and 2022. Yes.
Maurizio, can I say just something?
Yes.
I think people are confused about these OECD rates. As if I understood correctly, you have to take the three values, 2001, 2002, and 2021 now, and then compare. And the lowest is the one that you're going to use. Is it correct?
That's completely correct. That's completely correct. So to make it easy, assume the purchase of the property is from 2001 and forward, so within the years. Then you use the OECD index value of that year and recalculate. So assume you bought the property in 2017, for instance. You use the index of Italy for 2017 and recalculate using the index for Italy for 2001, 2002, and the income year, meaning 2022 now or 2021. Okay? And then you use the same method for afstandsprocent, meaning that's basically just a calculation method we use to lower or increase the market value based on the year. So that's the approach. And then you're completely correct. We use the lowest value of the 2001, the 2002, and the current year. Bear in mind, we add 5% to the 2002 value. Again, all you need to do is declare the values of these three, and then the Danish tax agency will calculate the property taxes.
So those two questions are kind of goes together. What do we do from here? Reopen the 2021 SCAT declaration, or do we start for 2022? And what are the consequences of someone that did not pay taxes in Denmark while paying them in Italy, actually, in the previous year?
Yes. So again, we cannot really say anything else than open the years. So if you had something to declare that has not been declared, our advice will always be to declare it, because it's likely going to be found out by the tax authorities. You shouldn't worry that they find out or not, since information is being shared. And if you declare it yourself, it's a better position. You're coming from a position of power instead of a position of being caught, so to speak. So we cannot advise to anything else than declare it. So in terms of what happens, that depends on how much we're looking for in terms of value here. So if the values are less than 500,000 Danish kroner, I believe that's the value, but maybe Andre, you can look it up. I believe it's 500,000 Danish kroner. Then we're not looking at penalties, but we're looking at interest potentially and minor fines. If you have declared income in Italy, you might be able to argue that I was unaware that I needed to declare anything in Denmark. I have declared in Italy. That doesn't spawn a position where you can be relieved of the duty in Denmark. it does not spawn a position where the Danish tax authorities will potentially not look at this in terms of punishment and interest, but it's a better position than not having done anything.
And I agree to that, Jacob, because when you are in a situation where the Danish tax agency is going to do an audit of your taxes and they find something, you are gonna, and we can already now prepare you that you're gonna receive the information that you will be sent to what they call a valuation for if you have committed a crime, or what we in Danish call a straffesagsvurdering. And basically what that means is that they need to look into, did you commit a crime in regards to tax declaration, because you had an obligation to file this information. And we're typically looking into fines, but it depends on what we are seeing in the, and in situation marks here, what kind of amount the fraud has been about. And I'm sorry to call it fraud here, but that would be how the Danish tax agency initially will look at it when income or properties has not been declared.
Okay.
But having declared income in Italy would always be a good position to be in, because you have actually done something.
Okay. So, but let's say, for example, I have a house from 1996 or from 2000. I can only open my tax on the website for the last 2-3 years, right?
Yes, you cannot do anything
So
else than that.
I go there and put my taxi for those 2-3 years. Is there a way I can tell them, look, my house is older, I didn't pay? There is a way to do that, or you just have to pay for those last 2-3 years and hope they will forgive you?
That's a great question. So, and basically, we're looking at the difference between ordinarily reassessment and extraordinary reassessment. And the ordinary reassessment is 3 years or 4 years, depending on timing here. But it's only 3 income years. It's just we calculate on a very specific way. But 3 years, and you can do that, and the taxes will be collected more or less automatically. So, in terms of the years prior to that and back to the 10 years from now, you can only do this if there are reasoning for changing, like fraudulent behavior, as Andrea is saying. And this is the assessment of the tax authorities alone. So you cannot change that, or that cannot be changed by the taxpayer. So it's a more matter of strategy and how to do this. But the advice would be to reach out to the authorities and tell them the entire position from our point of view, explaining the position, explaining the income, explaining the properties, and explaining that this has been declared in Italy and taxes assessed in Italy, and then from there take the discussion upfront, more or less. And I agree with Andrea, it's likely going to be a 10-year period.
Is it advisable to do this through a consultant, or is just call SCAT yourself and tell them?
Yeah,
that is
so
of course. Oh, sorry,
Jacob.
Jacob.
No, go ahead.
That is of course based on the situation that you are in. If you do not feel comfortable with taking this discussion with the Danish tax agency, we will of course recommend using either an advisor as us or a lawyer to go towards the Danish tax agency. And but there are no criteria to do so. You can just as well go towards the Danish tax agency as a private person, stating, I think I have made a mistake. And that will be fine to do so. So that's depending your situation.
Okay. So there is another legal question here. We really do not need straffesag if we are applying for Danish citizenship, and this misinformation will lead to a ban. Is this true, or?
Yeah, so that's outside of our area of expertise, but it's again, it really depends on how much we're looking for in terms of taxes here, because I would imagine that even though it might be several years, the actual income might not be that high. So and that's more or less how we treat this. If it's a first time offense, if it's excusable to some extent if the values are not high. We're not looking at potential more or less criminal cases, but again, we are not experts in criminal law and whatnot, so we would advise to take on specific advisors. But looking at rental, looking at property taxes, the valuation for most of these might not get to the levels and thresholds that we're looking for in terms of the high punishments and whatnot.
Okay, thanks. Can the property tax eiendomsskatt paid abroad be used to offset income from renting?
So, could you come again, Mauricio? Sorry.
Can the property tax, the eiendomsskatt, paid abroad, paid in Italy, can that be used to offset the income from renting?
Maybe. So, some property taxes we do accept is offset in rental income. So, depending on if this property tax is assessed and could be more or less considered as an expense for this business, that's normally the case, but it is a specific evaluation.
Okay. Can I use the TASI paid in Italy for tax relief in Denmark? Maybe this is for Fabrizio. I don't know. What is TASI?
TASI is a lower property tax which was in force until 2020, but then it was abolished and absorbed by IMU. So I think the guy is referring to this smaller tax similar to IMU, which was payable until 2020. So it's like the property tax, but it's a smaller amount.
So can it be added to the IMU and taken together as a property tax or relief?
Well, I think it's more for Jacob. It's more for Jacob.
I would imagine that is the case. Yes.
Thanks. So this is more of a practical one. If we pay cedolare secca, which is how do we call it, Fabrizio?
Cedolare secca, yes.
How do you call it in English?
Flat tax.
Flat tax. If we pay flat tax in Italy, but then in Denmark we have to pay the same amount minus what we paid in Italy. Is there any point in doing the flat tax in Italy?
Well, I think it's more for me, but I didn't understand the question correctly. I think the guy meant how is it convenient to me opting for cedolare secca instead of progressive taxation? I think that
because in Denmark you still subtract the amount you paid in Denmark, but you pay the difference in Denmark anyway. So in the end you pay the same amount, right?
Yes.
I think if the cedolare secca is creditable in Denmark, I think that there is no issue in using the cedolare secca.
Yeah, then it's only a matter of you choose to which country you want to give more money, to Italy or to Denmark.
Basically, yes, you need to you need to look at the compounded tax rate between Italy and Denmark on the whole. Okay, so you have to make a convenience analysis basically on how much money do you still have when you have paid in Italy and in Denmark, considering the credits.
Yes.
So
okay, thanks. Yeah. Another practical question: what is the average cost per hours or per service of a tax advisor in Denmark?
Yeah, so
we can even answer this.
Yeah, it depends on the individual that you're looking for. So we're looking in Denmark, the range will likely be around 1,500 Danish kroner per hour, up to 3,000-4,000 per hour, depending on the individual that you're looking for.
Yeah.
But often advisors will agree to fixed fees or more or less a cap on the services.
Yeah, it's
That's
more
why.
or less the same. It's more or less the same in Italy. So in addition, we offer this service as a team. So we will certainly find the best fee for our common clients. So I mean, to all those who are following the seminar, we act as a team. So any questions can be directed to us, and I will share them with Jacob, and everyone will address his own questions depending on the country and depending on the law in force. And of course, we will do our best in order to merge our advices.
Yes. Okay, guys, I cannot identify any question that is not being asked here. I don't know, Fabrizio, if you have any special question here that you think it could be interesting to answer, because we only have 10 minutes now.
Well, I was just scrolling down the questions, but I have not seen again.
Maybe you guys, also Jacob, Matthias, and Andrea, you can also see the question. So I don't know if you can choose any more relevant question here that you want to answer.
I just saw a comment here from Fabio, and I just want to remark that it's likely that this is not being investigated as a crime or criminal case. We completely agree on that, but it might be that depending on more or less the outcome of it, that might be the next step. But this is likely a position right now where they're trying to do this for in more or less ease the process, notify and help. Definitely.
Yeah. I don't know, Jacob, if you saw where the questions are. There is a tab beside the chat with the activities, and then
Yes.
you can see Q&A.
Yeah, I can just scroll through them here. So there's a question regarding France, and that's of course very specific to France. But Denmark had a double tax treaty with France, which was then abolished, which is why there are specific rules for France, because it was covered by the double tax treaty. Denmark will have a new treaty with France going into next year.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I can add a comment because I have seen some questions in regards to short-term rental and long-term rental. And it is important to actually distinct between these two. So short-term renting would typically be below 12 months. So if you're renting out a place of living in Italy, for instance, for less than 12 months, we would typically consider this as capital income in Denmark, meaning a slightly lower taxation of a bracket of maximum 42%. But if you are long-term renting out a home, we would consider it business income, thus, however, not considering as a business income as you would need to be paying business tax or corporate taxes. But when we are considering you as a long-term rental in a business, we would tax you as personal income. And personal income would be taxed at a maximum of 55%. So long-term rental, 55% at the maximum, and short-term rental at the maximum of 42%. The corporate tax of 22% only comes into effect if you are investing in property through a company, an actual registered company, and you're renting out through that company. But that would also come with a lot of extra things that you would need to consider, as this is in a whole different field.
And Andrea just had a question in respect of this. So in case of more properties, shall rent income be considered individually or both as business income? And again, we can say the more properties that is sublets, the more likely this is to be considered a viable business, more or less.
Agreed.
Okay. I don't know. I think if you don't have any other questions that you think are relevant, I think more or less all those questions have been already answered. So again,
sorry. I can maybe add one comment here at the end before we just round off our final presentation. Generally, the property is one thing, meaning that when you have been asked for information in regards to property, that will be from Vurderingsstyrelsen, and they would be only looking at, do you have property abroad, and would be looking for you paying property value added tax. But you should really consider that if you have other types of income, and it's not something that we have discussed a lot tonight, but if you have other types of income as a tax resident of Denmark, such as interest income, capital gains on shares, for instance, and you have sold these shares, you should really consider to at least find this information and report it as soon as possible, because you would, from a general perspective, be considered taxable to Denmark of this, and Denmark would also have taxation right. So property is one thing, but all your other types of income as a tax resident of Denmark would typically entail more taxes than the properties. So just to round that off from my side before we end the presentation, you really need to consider this as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I will say we don't have time to answer any more questions. I would like to remind that the presentation has been recorded. We will publish it on our website. We will get also a review, how do you call it, Fabrizio? A resume of the night.
Yes.
We will try to also revisit what we said, so that it will also re-answer the questions. You can find when we were ready, you will find it on the website Com.It.Es.dk. And then maybe I will leave another 2-3 minutes to the guys to represent themselves and give the information about their studios in case somebody needs, Fabrizio, maybe in case they need more specific consultancies. I don't know.
Yes, of course. We work with Jacob, Matthias, and Andre in the same network, and they are really keen on furnishing all advice which is useful to our clients. We will address all questions they have from Rome, and we will work with them in order to respond to everyone. So feel free to contact us, and we will contact Jacob, Andrea, and Matthias and work together on a total and global advice to these clients. I'm saying this also because there may be Italian tax aspects which may have to be analyzed, and also Italian positions in terms of residency, which need to be carefully analyzed as well.
Okay. So thanks to Matthias, Andrea, Jacob, and Fabrizio. And I would like to thank also Ilaria, Barbara, Enrica, and all the committees that helped tonight.
You're welcome.
Thanks to everybody who intervened and listened and asked questions. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a great evening.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.